Hi, welcome back to my channel. In this video, I will be talking about circle of Willis. So I will explain it in an easier way and you just have to follow through. So first of all, we have something like this. This is our internal carotid artery and this is our middle cerebral artery. Alright. Then we have some branch which goes on like this. Alright. And it communicates like this. So this is our anterior cerebral artery and this is anterior communicating artery. Alright, then we have one more communicating artery, and I will just tell you what I'm drawing. So here we have posterior communicating artery. Then here where we had anterior, middle, and now we have posterior cerebral artery. This is our basilar artery which has a lot of branches, pontine branches, and it has one labyrinthine artery. Then here we have vertebral artery. Now let's talk about this is anterior spinal artery. Now you would think, where does the posterior spinal artery lie? It lies here. This is posterior spinal artery. Alright, then we have some branches like the superior cerebellar artery and inferior cerebellar artery. So over here you will see that we have the superior cerebellar artery. So this is superior cerebellar artery. Alright, then we have inferior cerebellar artery. There it is two. First we have anterior cerebellar artery. Inferior, sorry, my bad. Anterior inferior cerebellar artery. Then we have here this is our inferior, just give me a second. Here we have posterior inferior cerebellar artery. Alright, so this is it, and then you can remember one more which I'm drawing here. From the middle you have the anterior choroidal artery, and from the posterior cerebellar artery here you have posterior choroidal artery. Alright, these are the branches you should know. Fine, now let's just go through it once again. So first of all, just remember three things. We have anterior cerebellar artery, then we have anterior cerebellar artery, middle cerebral artery, and posterior cerebral artery. Alright, then anterior communicating artery, then posterior communicating artery, then basilar artery, and then we have vertebral artery, then anterior spinal artery and posterior spinal artery. Now here you can remember two more things. Some branches lie outside and some lie on the inside. Just give me a second. See, suppose like this you have, and some lie inside. So what happens is the outer branches are called as medullary branches, and the inner branches are called as meningeal branches. Okay, you have to remember this also. So yeah, so from middle you have anterior choroidal, and from posterior cerebral artery you have posterior choroidal. Then we have cerebellar artery, which is different, which I've drawn in pink. So you have superior and inferior. Inferior is further into anterior and posterior. Okay, anterior and posterior. All right, then now let's just go through the diagrams and like solidify our concept. So first of all, see, I told you, first of all, just observe three things. One is the anterior cerebral artery, you should see middle cerebral artery and posterior cerebral artery. So anterior cerebral artery is somewhere here, right? Then we have middle cerebral artery. Okay, then you remember here we had internal here we had internal carotid artery, right? Here we had internal carotid artery. This is our anterior cerebral artery. Then this is our middle cerebral artery. Then this is our posterior cerebral artery. Now the one which joins middle cerebral artery, posterior cerebral artery is our posterior communicating artery. All right, then niche we have basilar artery, which is further vertebral artery and anterior spinal artery. Outside we have posterior spinal artery. Now if I ask you one more thing, from the middle one, right, you had near the middle one you had the anterior choroidal. All right, anterior, just give me a second. Here you had anterior choroidal artery, and from the posterior one you had posterior choroidal artery, right? And if you remember nicely, after the posterior cerebral we had somewhere, if posterior cerebral is this, here somewhere we had superior cerebellar artery, and then here we had anterior inferior cerebellar artery, and then here we had the inferior, basically posterior inferior cerebellar artery. All right, now let's go to the second, this I'll explain first. Let's go through this one. Now again, just observe the first the cerebral arteries. All right, so this one, so anterior cerebral artery, right, middle cerebral artery, internal carotid artery, then we had posterior cerebral artery. All right, same as the diagram. Then second choice, go through the communicating branches first, anterior communicating artery and posterior communicating artery. All right, then go through the cerebellar arteries. So we have the superior cerebellar artery, then anterior inferior and posterior inferior. Then I told you about the spinal artery, anterior spinal artery and posterior spinal artery. Then observe two more things, basilar artery and the vertebral artery. Okay, then I told you about the inside and outside thing. So outside branch is medullary, inside branch is meningeal. Okay, then I told you about the anterior choroidal. So anterior choroidal from middle cerebral artery and the posterior choroidal through the posterior cerebral artery. All right, so this is it. Now there is a picture given of these CT scan, or I don't know, MRI something. So in BD hysteresis, so we should be thorough with this, because in INI we can be asked such questions. So I will just guide you through how you have to make out and what is what. All right, so let's just start. So first of all, observe this. All right, so this is our anterior cerebral artery. Okay, then observe that this one. All right, so this is our internal carotid artery. So obviously after internal carotid artery, here we will have middle cerebral artery. All right, so this is middle cerebral artery. Now obviously the one which is communicating the anterior cerebral and internal carotid artery and all, this specifically I am talking about. So obviously this is going to be our posterior communicating artery, posterior communicating artery. All right, then observe this. Now this is our basilar artery. So obviously basilar artery, so near it I need some very flashy color. So over here this one will be obviously our posterior cerebral artery. All right, then The one which is communicating is sorry, this is posterior communicating artery, this is anterior communicating. Yeah, all right. So yeah, so this is the diagram. Now let's go through this one. So basilar artery, right? Then we have middle cerebral artery, then we will have internal carotid artery and anterior cerebral artery. So this completes the circle of Willis. And recent question which was asked was see what you can be asked from a circle of Willis. Either there can be a diagram which will ask you about the questions. So either it can be a labeling image based question. Then there was a NEET 2024 question, most common artery involved in aneurysm in circle of Willis. So it is our anterior communicating artery. Then you can be asked about the relations of circles of Willis, like which forms the anterior part and which forms the posterior part. So this is suppose like in anterior you will see it is formed by anterior cerebral, middle cerebral artery and posterior cerebral artery. Here you will mention about the communicating branches here also. So this is circle of Willis. So if you like the video,